Welcome back to Mr. Midnight. Tonight we're going deep into Alaska's polar night with 6 true disturbing horror stories. These stories come from real people: nurses, delivery drivers, inspectors, photographers, scientists, and helicopter pilots who saw something in Alaska they can't explain. Each story happens in places so far from civilization that the nearest town is hundreds of miles away, where the sun completely disappears for 3 whole months, and where that never-ending darkness changes people in scary ways. These accounts come from personal diaries, official reports, and recordings that show what really happens when the darkness never stops. If you're new here, subscribe to Mr. Midnight for true horror stories that will keep you awake at night. Hit the bell so you don't miss our next scary story. Now let's go into Alaska's darkest winter, where it stays pitch black all day and night for months, where it gets so cold you can die in minutes, and where something waits in that frozen darkness that nobody can explain. These are stories that will make you think twice about ever visiting Alaska in winter. My name is Angela Hayes, and I've been a traveling nurse for 11 years. I got my RN at Tampa General, did my time in ER rotations, ICU, even a year in pediatrics before I realized I liked the freedom of contract work better. Moving every few months, seeing new places, meeting new people, it paid well and kept life interesting. I've handled everything from hurricane evacuations to COVID surges. I've seen people die, saved lives, worked 30-hour shifts when hospitals were desperate. But nothing in my training, nothing in 11 years of nursing, prepared me for what happened during the polar night in Utqiagvik, Alaska. Some medical conditions don't exist in textbooks. Some diseases aren't supposed to be real. I took the Alaska contract in October 2023, 3 months after my divorce finalized. My ex-husband got the house, I got the debt, and my lawyer got $15,000 I didn't have. When the recruitment email came through offering $45,000 for a 90-day winter contract in Utqiagvik, the northernmost town in Alaska, I didn't even think twice. Triple pay for working through the polar night, 3 months of darkness for enough money to get back on my feet. My kids would stay with their dad. I'd be home by Valentine's Day. It seemed simple. I flew into Utqiagvik on November 10th. The hospital was smaller than I expected, just a single-story building with maybe 20 beds total. The staff was me, 1 doctor, and a part-time janitor who came in twice a week. Dr. Kovac had been there for 20 years. He was maybe 60, gray beard, tired eyes, the kind of doctor who'd seen too much and stopped caring about bedside manner. During my first day orientation, he showed me around the supply closets and the medication room, explained the basic procedures, then stopped at the window overlooking the parking lot. "People get strange in the darkness," he said, not looking at me. "Medical strange, things that don't make sense." I figured he was just trying to scare the new nurse. Every hospital has a veteran who loves messing with travelers. The first week was normal. I treated frostbite, stitched up a guy who'd cut his hand fixing a snowmobile, monitored an elderly Inupiaq woman with pneumonia, standard small-town medicine. Every night I video called my kids. Emma was 7, Marcus was 9, and they'd ask when I was coming home. I'd count down the days. 83 remaining, 82, 81. The last sunset was November 18th at 1:47 p.m. I watched from the hospital window as the sun touched the horizon and disappeared. We wouldn't see it again for 67 days. I felt something in my chest watching that last sliver of light vanish, this deep, animal dread I couldn't explain. That night, my first unusual patient arrived. His name was Joseph Malik, 42 years old, worked at the fuel depot. He came in at 11 p.m. with his hands wrapped in towels, and when I unwrapped them, I saw severe frostbite. His fingers were white and waxy, the tissue clearly damaged. "When did you go outside?" I asked, prepping a warming bath. "I didn't," he said. "I've been home for 3 days. Got the flu. Been on my couch the whole time." I looked at his hands again. This was stage 3 frostbite at least. "Mr. Malik, this level of tissue damage requires sustained exposure to extreme cold. Are you sure you didn't?" "I'm sure." His voice shook. "I woke up 2 hours ago and my hands were like this. They burn. It feels like ice inside my bones. Dr. Kovac examined Joseph, and I watched his face go pale. He told me to set up a quarantine room immediately. When I asked why, he just said, wouldn't help. I snuck a look at Joseph's chart when Dr. Kovac was doing rounds. His note said, Stage 1 night freeze, likely progression to Stage 3 within 72 hours. No treatment available. Isolate and document. I'd never heard of night freeze. I searched every medical database I could access on the hospital computers. Nothing. Not in any journal, any textbook, any case study. It didn't exist. 2 more patients arrived on day 4. A 16-year-old girl named Sarah with blackened toes. A woman in her 40s with her left ear turning black and brittle. Both had been indoors. Both swore they hadn't been exposed to cold. I cornered Dr. Kovac in his office. What the hell is night freeze? He looked at me for a long moment, then unlocked a filing cabinet and pulled out a folder. Inside were photos, bodies with black frozen limbs, faces frozen in expressions of agony. Medical examiner reports describing internal organs found frozen solid during autopsies. It happens every polar night, Dr. Kovac said quietly. 10 to 15 people. Starts with extremities, spreads inward. The tissue literally freezes from the inside out even though core temperature stays normal. 100% fatal. No cure. They die when it reaches vital organs. That's not possible, I whispered. I know, but it happens anyway. Doctors have documented it since the 1950s. Indigenous healers have stories going back centuries. Something about the long darkness freezes people from within. Joseph died on day 5. I was checking his vitals when his chest turned black. I heard his ribs crack as they froze. His heart just stopped. I called my ex-husband that night crying, saying I wanted to leave. He reminded me I'd signed a contract. We needed the money. I was trapped there for 81 more days. The 16-year-old girl died 3 days later. It took 8 days total. Her parents were there, holding her hands while she screamed that her heart was freezing. I vomited in the bathroom after. I started noticing patterns. All the night freeze patients had spent time near the old section of the hospital, a wing built in the 1960s that was mostly storage now. One night I explored it with a flashlight. It was noticeably colder back there even though the heating system was running. My breath fogged in the air. I found frozen handprints on the walls. Dozens of them, like people had pressed their hands against the concrete and left permanent frost impressions. They wouldn't melt. They'd been there for decades. Dr. Kovac found me and dragged me out. That wing is off limits. Never go back there. But he must have known I wouldn't listen, because the next day he told me the full truth. In 1962, the hospital had a catastrophic freezer malfunction. 12 patients died of hypothermia in their beds before anyone noticed. Something about those deaths during the polar night created a permanent cold spot, a thermal anomaly that spread during the darkness. The cold is alive somehow, Dr. Kovac said. Not scientifically, but practically. It seeks warm bodies, infects them. Indigenous people knew not to build permanent structures on certain ground during winter. This hospital was built wrong, on hungry ground. It takes people every polar night as payment. I thought he was insane. But 3 days later, I developed a headache and nausea. I assumed it was exhaustion. I'd been working 16-hour shifts. Then I noticed my fingertips were numb. I took my temperature, 98.6 degrees. But when I touched my fingers, they were ice cold. I was infected. I hid it from Dr. Kovac for 2 days, keeping my gloves on constantly. But the gray spread under my fingernails and the pain became excruciating, like my bones were freezing and expanding from inside. When Dr. Kovac finally discovered my eye infection during an exam, he was surprisingly kind. Wasn't dying in Alaska. I researched frantically, reading every case file. I found one survivor, an Inupiaq healer named Mary Kunuk, who survived night freeze in 1978. She was still alive, living in the village. I visited her without telling Dr. Kovac. Mary looked at my blackened fingers and nodded. You have the dark cold. I lived because I fed it something else. How? It wants your warmth. You give it different warmth, blood warmth. sacrifice warmth. She explained that in 1978 she'd taken 12 sled dogs to the old wing and killed them there. Their deaths bought her life. She'd lived with the guilt ever since. I was horrified, but my infection had spread to my wrists. I had maybe 3 days before it reached my heart. Another patient came in the next day, a hunter named Tom Ansel with early-stage night freeze in his toes. I looked at him and thought, if he dies in the old wing naturally, maybe his death will feed the cold enough to release me. I convinced him to help me investigate the old section, lying that there might be medical equipment back there that could help us both. Dr. Kovac was off shift. We went together. The old wing was impossibly cold. Frost formed on our skin instantly. Tom collapsed after just a few minutes. His infection accelerated rapidly. His entire legs turned black in seconds. He was screaming, and I stood there, watching. It took 4 minutes for him to die. His body temperature dropped to below zero while his core stayed at 98 degrees. When he died, I felt the cold surge through the room like a wave. Then my fingers suddenly warmed. The black receded. The infection drained out of me like water. Tom's death bought my life. Dr. Kovac found me collapsed in the modern section. He knew immediately what I'd done. People do terrible things to survive, he said, disappointed. That's why I never tell patients about the old treatment. Better to die with dignity than live with murder. Tom's family came to the hospital the next day. I told them he died from his infection. They thanked me for trying to save him. Their grief was unbearable. 2 weeks later, another patient got night freeze, a young mother named Sarah with 3 kids. She begged for help. I found myself thinking about the old wing again, about the trade. I told her about the old treatment. Didn't offer to help, just explained it existed. Sarah took a scalpel from the supply room that night. I found her body in the old wing an hour later. She'd slit her wrists, dead from blood loss, not freezing. She chose her own death over the cold's timing. Dr. Kovac told me I needed to leave, that I was compromised, but I couldn't leave. When I tried to walk to the airstrip, my body wouldn't move. The cold inside me wouldn't let me go. I got night freeze 20 years ago, Dr. Kovac admitted. Used the old treatment, never left. The cold owns you now. My body temperature started dropping, 98.6 to 97.9 to 97.2, getting colder every day. I stopped shivering because my body didn't register cold anymore. I started bringing patients to the old wing, exposing them, watching night freeze take them. Each death fed the cold and fed me. I was becoming an extension of it. 6 more people died under my care that winter, the village noticed. But Dr. Kovac covered for me, falsified reports. He needed me to become what he was, a servant of the cold. I stopped going outside. Even negative 40-degree air felt warm, burned my skin. I moved into the old wing, slept on the floor where Tom died. The frozen handprints felt like home. My skin turned gray. My eyes lost their warmth. When I breathed, my breath was colder than the air around me. One patient developed frostbite just from my touch. I called my kids one last time, told them never to come to Alaska, never to look for me. My daughter was crying, asking what was wrong. Sunlight burned my skin like acid. I hid in the coldest, darkest place. Dr. Kovac brought me food, but I didn't eat. The cold sustained me. I waited through the summer. My body temperature stabilized at 89 degrees. People reported seeing a nurse in the old wing, pale and quiet. Management dismissed it as stories. When November returned and the sun set again, I emerged. My body temperature was 85 degrees. My skin was gray and hard. My breath froze moisture in the air. I walked the hospital halls at night, and patients started dying. Night freeze spreading faster than ever because I was its vector now. Its incarnation. The cold made flesh. Dr. Kovac watched with satisfaction. He'd trained his replacement. My children received a death certificate in Florida. Angela Hayes died of hypothermia, November 23rd. They cried and mourned. They don't know their mother isn't dead, just transformed into something that stalks the hospital every polar night. touching patients with frozen hands, breathing infection into their lungs. I'm still here, still cold, still hungry, waiting in the basement through the bright summers, hunting through the dark winters, forever trapped in the place where warmth goes to die. My name is Marcus Williams, and I've been a delivery driver for 8 years. Started with pizza in Detroit, moved to Amazon, then DoorDash, Uber Eats, you name it, I've driven for them. I'm good at what I do. I know every shortcut in the city, can handle difficult customers, and I've never missed a delivery window. But when you're 30 grand in credit card debt and your car's about to get repossessed, you start looking at job postings you'd normally scroll past. That's how I found Arctic Fresh. $8,000 a month, plus free housing to deliver groceries in rural Alaska. The posting was buried deep in a gig worker forum, and honestly, it seemed too good to be true. But I was desperate. My landlord was threatening eviction. My credit cards were maxed, and I hadn't eaten anything but ramen in 2 weeks, so I applied. The phone interview lasted 5 minutes. The manager, a guy named Steve, asked if I had a clean driving record and if I was okay with isolation. When I said yes to both, he told me I was hired. A plane ticket to Fairbanks would be in my email within an hour. I should have researched the company more. Should have asked why they were so desperate for drivers. But when you're broke, you don't ask too many questions. The flight to Alaska was my first time on a plane. 30 hours of travel, including layovers. And by the time I landed in Fairbanks, I was exhausted. Steve picked me up in a company truck. A white Ford Transit with Arctic Fresh painted on the sides. He was a thin guy in his 50s, wearing a heavy parka and thick boots. "Welcome to Alaska, Marcus," he said, shaking my hand. "Hope you're ready for the darkness." I laughed, thinking he was talking about the weather. It was only October, and back in Detroit, we still had decent daylight. But as we drove out of Fairbanks, I started to understand what he meant. By 4 in the afternoon, the sun was, as already setting. By 5, it was pitch black. "Gets darker every day until December," Steve explained as we drove down a narrow road surrounded by pine trees. "Then it stays dark until February. That's why we need drivers who can handle the isolation. Regular folks can't deal with the polar night." My cabin was 30 miles outside Fairbanks, a small wood structure with a generator, satellite internet, and enough canned food to last a month. The company truck was parked outside. Same model as Steve's, equipped with a GPS system, radio, and enough gas to cover 200 miles. "Your route covers everything from here to the Canadian border," Steve said, handing me a tablet loaded with customer addresses. 47 regular customers, all living off-grid. Some are homesteaders, some are trappers, some just like being alone. They order groceries once a week, and you deliver. Simple as that. He showed me how to use the GPS, the radio, and the delivery app. Everything seemed standard. Upload delivery confirmation photos, get signatures on the tablet, mark packages as delivered. I'd done this thousands of times before. "One thing," Steve said as he was leaving. "The previous driver quit suddenly. Guy named Simon. Lasted 3 weeks, then drove back to town and flew home to Texas. Never gave a reason. Company's been without a driver for 2 months, so these folks are really happy you're here." After Steve left, I spent the evening organizing my route. 47 customers scattered across a 200-mile area. Some were only 10 miles apart. Others were 50 miles from their nearest neighbor. The tablet showed order histories, and I could see these people hadn't had deliveries in weeks. They were probably running low on supplies. My first week went smoothly. The customers were exactly what you'd expect from people living in the middle of nowhere, either incredibus, bligh-friendly, or completely silent. An old trapper named Dale barely spoke, just grunted when I handed him his groceries. A woman named Beth invited me in for coffee and talked for an hour about her homestead. A family with 3 kids treated me like I was Santa Claus, the kids running out to see what I'd brought them. The isolation was harder than I expected. With only 5 hours of daylight, my sleep schedule got messed up fast. Sometimes I'd wake up at 3 in the afternoon thinking it was morning. Sometimes I'd work until midnight, then sleep until noon. Without the sun, time became meaningless. But the customers were good to me. They tipped well, always had my delivery locations clearly marked, and several invited me in to warm up. After a week, I was starting to think this job might work out. Then things got weird. I was delivering to Beth's place, a small cabin about 40 miles south of mine. She came out to meet me like always, but when she saw me, she stopped and stared. "You look just like the last driver," she said, taking her bags of groceries. I laughed. "Yeah, Steve mentioned there was another driver before me. Guess we have the same build or something." Beth kept staring at me. "No, I mean exactly like him. Same face, same voice, even same jacket." She pointed at my Arctic Fresh uniform. "Are you related to him?" "I don't think so. My name's Marcus Williams." "What was his name?" "Marcus," Beth said quietly. "Marcus Williams." I felt cold. That's weird. Probably just a coincidence. But Beth kept staring at me like she'd seen a ghost. He said the same thing. When I got back to my cabin that night, I called Steve. "Hey, quick question about the previous driver. What was his name?" I heard Steve typing on a keyboard. "Marcus Williams, same as you. Weird coincidence, right?" My hands were shaking. "Can you tell me more about him? Like where he was from?" More typing. "Detroit, Michigan, 29 years old. Same birthday as you, actually. November 15th. That's really strange." I hung up and sat in my cabin, staring at the wall. This had to be some kind of prank. But why would a grocery delivery company in Alaska play pranks on their drivers? And how would they know my birthday? I tried calling my mom in Detroit, but the satellite phone wasn't working. The internet was too slow to video chat. I was completely cut off. The next day, I started paying more attention to my customers' reactions. Dale, the quiet trapper, looked at me for a long time when I handed him his groceries. "You're new," he said finally. "The other Marcus was here longer. You smell different." "Other Marcus?" "Driver before you. Looked just like you, but he'd been doing the route for months. You still smell like the city." I wanted to ask more questions, but Dale had already gone back inside his cabin. That evening, I searched my cabin more thoroughly. In the bedroom closet, I found clothes that fit me perfectly. Jeans in my exact size, shirts that could have come from my closet back home. In the bathroom, there was a toothbrush that looked exactly like mine. But the worst thing was the journal. I found it in the bedside table drawer, a small notebook with "Property of Marcus Williams" written on the front cover. The handwriting looked like mine. I opened it and started reading. Day 1. Made it to Alaska. Cabin's not bad. Customers seem nice. Day 5. Getting used to the darkness. Sleep schedule is messed up, but I'm managing. Day 12. Something weird is happening. Customers keep talking about conversations I don't remember having. Day 18. Found photos on the wall of someone who looks exactly like me with these same customers. I didn't take these photos. Day 25. Beth gave me cookies today. Said they were like I loved last time. I've never had her cookies before. Day 30. I'm losing time. Sometimes I wake up in my truck with no memory of driving there. The delivery app shows completed orders I don't remember. Day 35. Saw my truck on a parallel road today. Same exact truck, same company logo. But I was driving mine. How can there be two? My hands were shaking as I read. The handwriting was identical to mine. The details were specific and accurate, but I'd never written any of this. I flipped to the last entry. Day 42. I saw him today. My double. He was delivering to the north route while I was doing south. Customers say we're both real, both Marcus. I'm driving back to Fairbanks tonight, not staying to find out what happens when we meet. The journal ended there. I threw the notebook across the room and called Steve immediately. I need to quit. I'm driving back to Fairbanks tonight. Steve's voice was calm, almost sad. They always try to leave, Marcus. It's okay. You'll be back. What do you mean they always try to leave? But Steve had hung up. I packed my bags and got in the truck. The GPS said Fairbanks was 90 minutes away. I'd driven this route dozens of times. I knew every turn, every landmark. But after 3 hours of driving, I wasn't any closer to town. The GPS kept saying I was making progress, but the road never changed. Same pine trees, same darkness, same snow. I passed a crooked tree with a broken branch 4 different times. I was driving in a circle. I turned around and drove the opposite direction. Same thing. No matter which way I went, I ended up back at my cabin. The darkness was trapping me. I broke down crying in my truck, then went inside and called Steve again. The phone went straight to voicemail. At midnight, someone knocked on my door. It was Beth carrying a thermos of soup. "It's always hard when they realize," she said kindly, coming inside without being invited. "The previous Marcus took 2 months to accept it. You're faster." "Accept what?" "That you're staying. This is your route forever, Marcus. The darkness needs a delivery driver." Beth sat down at my kitchen table like she owned the place. "Certain jobs bind you here during polar night. Delivery driver is one, teacher is another, mail carrier, pilot, anyone who connect us." Was the isolated. "Once you take the job during the darkness, you're tied to it. You become permanent." "That's insane." Beth pulled out a photo album. "This is every delivery driver for the past 40 years. All named Marcus Williams, all from Detroit, all 29 years old." She was right. Photo after photo of men who looked exactly like me, wearing the same uniform, standing next to the same truck. The photos went back decades, but the faces were identical. "The job creates its driver," Beth explained. "Makes him, keeps him. When one leaves, another arrives. The darkness needs consistency." "What happened to the others?" "They're still here. All of them. You've been delivering with them. You just haven't noticed." That night, I didn't sleep. I sat by my window, watching the road. At 3 a.m., I saw headlights. My exact truck drove past, heading toward Dale's place. Same white Ford Transit, same company logo. At 4 a.m., another one drove past, going the opposite direction. At 5 a.m., a third one. I was not alone out here. The next day, I tried to stay awake. If I was blacking out and doing deliveries I didn't remember, maybe I could fight it by not sleeping. I drank coffee, did jumping jacks, slapped myself when I felt drowsy. I made it 50 hours before I collapsed. When I woke up, I was in my truck parked outside a customer's house 60 miles away. My delivery tablet showed 8 completed orders. I had no memory of any of them. But the customer, an old woman named Rita, came out to thank me. "Best delivery yet, Marcus," she said. "You were so helpful carrying everything inside, and thanks for fixing my generator." I had never been inside her house. I didn't know how to fix generators. "When was I here?" I asked. "About an hour ago. Don't you remember?" I drove back to my cabin in silence. In my journal, my real journal, not the one I'd found, I wrote, "Day 15. I'm losing time. I'm not in control anymore." The customers started treating me like I'd been there for years. Dale asked about my girlfriend in Detroit. I'd never mentioned having a girlfriend. Beth thanked me for advice about her chickens. I didn't know anything about chickens. A homesteader named John asked if I'd thought about his offer to stay permanently. What offer? I found more journals hidden around the cabin, different handwriting in each one, but the same story. Different Marcus Williams drivers, all experiencing the same thing, all fighting the blackouts, the time loss, the splitting of consciousness. All, eventually, accepting it. Day 67. I don't mind the blackouts anymore. My body knows the route even when my mind doesn't. Day 89. Saw 3 other versions of myself today. We waved at each other. It felt normal. Day 156. The customers are my family now. Detroit feels like a dream. This is real. Day 203. Training a new Marcus today. He's scared. I remember being scared. It gets better. The handwriting in the final journal looked like mine, but older, more confident. The last entry was dated 6 months ago. Winter was getting deeper. The polar night was complete now, 24 hours of darkness. And in that darkness, I was becoming multiple people. I'd wake up with delivery confirmations on my tablet that I didn't remember. Customers would thank me for conversations I'd never had. Once I found a selfie on my phone of me with Rita, but I'd never taken a selfie with her. The GPS in my truck started showing impossible routes. It would direct me to a customer's house, but when I arrived, they'd say I'd already been there that morning. According to my tablet, I had been, but I remembered sleeping until noon. I was splitting. During the day, if you could call the endless darkness day, I was conscious Marcus, confused and fighting the situation. But there was another Marcus, maybe several, operating my body while I wasn't aware, delivering groceries, talking to customers, living a life I couldn't remember. One night, I saw them slow, early. 3 other Marcus Williams, driving identical trucks, delivering to different routes. They looked exactly like me, wore the same uniform, had the same mannerisms. When one of them saw me, he waved sadly, like he remembered being the confused one. I tried to talk to him, but he drove away into the darkness. The customers started bringing me gifts: food, warm clothes, handmade items. They said I'd been so helpful, so reliable, so much better than the previous Marcus drivers, but I barely remembered interacting with most of them. "You're the best delivery driver we've ever had," Beth told me one day. "The other versions of you are nice, but you're special. You actually care about us." Other versions of me? "How many are there, Ba?" I asked. 5, usually. Sometimes 6 during busy weeks. You all take different routes, but you're all Marcus. You're all good at the job. I stopped fighting it. What was the point? My body was going to do the deliveries whether I was conscious or not. The customers needed their groceries. The isolation would kill them without regular supply runs. And honestly, when I let go and stopped trying to control everything, it wasn't so bad. The conscious parts of my day were peaceful. I could read, cook, maintain the cabin. The other versions of me handled the work. I started thinking of them as colleagues rather than invaders. We were all Marcus Williams, all delivery drivers, all serving the same customers. We shared the same body, the same truck, the same route. We were efficient. Spring came eventually, and something changed. The sun returned, and suddenly I was just one person again. All my memories consolidated. I remembered every delivery, every customer interaction, every conversation from the winter months. I had been all of those Marcus drivers. Steve called and offered me summer work at a warehouse in Fairbanks. I could leave the road, live in town, be a normal person, until winter returned. But I didn't want to leave. The customers had become my family. Beth made the best coffee I'd ever tasted. Dale had taught me how to read animal tracks. Rita's stories about her late husband were the highlight of my week. These people depended on me, and honestly, the splitting hadn't been traumatic. It had been efficient. 5 Marcus Williams could cover the entire territory in half the time. Customers got better service, faster deliveries, more personal attention. When November came, I returned to my cabin without hesitation. Put on my uniform, loaded up the truck, started the route. Within a week, I was splitting again, waking up to find completed deliveries, sharing consciousness with other versions of myself. It felt like coming home. The company hired another driver that winter, Marcus Williams, 29, from Detroit. I helped train him, just like the previous drivers had probably helped train me. "It's not so bad," I told him as he stared at the journal he'd found in his cabin. "You get used to it. The job is important. People need us." He looked terrified, like I probably had. But he'd come around. They always did. Now it's been 5 years. I'm technically 34, but I'm 29 during the polar nights when it matters. There are usually 6 Marcus Williams working the route now, sometimes 7 during busy periods. We're a well-oiled machine. I don't think about Detroit anymore. My mom died 3 years ago, and I flew back for the funeral. My family barely recognized me. I was distant, cold, obsessed with getting back to Alaska. My sister asked if I was okay. "I'm perfect," I told her. "I have important work." And I do. Every winter, when the darkness comes, I become multiple people serving 47 customers across 200 miles of frozen wilderness. We deliver their groceries, check on their health, fix their equipment, listen to their stories. We are Marcus Williams, delivery driver, servant of the route. The darkness sustains us, splits us, multiplies us to serve. The isolated, and when spring comes and I consolidate back into one person, I spend the bright months counting down to November when I can split apart again and do the work that matters. The job chose me. The route claimed me. The darkness made me perfect for this. I wouldn't have it any other way. My name is Dmitry Volkov, and I've been a USDA fishery inspector for 14 years. I've checked fish plants from Seattle to Nome, making sure the food that ends up on American tables is safe to eat. I've seen rotten fish, dirty equipment, and workers who don't follow the rules. I've shut down operations that tried to cut corners and put people at risk. In all those years, I thought I'd seen everything the fishing industry could throw at me. I was wrong. What happened last winter at a remote processing plant near Prudhoe Bay changed everything I thought I knew about fish, about the ocean, and about what it means to be human. I'm telling you this story because I need someone to know the truth, because the official reports will say I died in an ice accident. But I didn't die. I became something else. The assignment came in January 2025. A routine winter inspection at Arctic Deep Processing, a Russian-American company that operates year-round catching Arctic cod. Most plants shut down in winter, but this one kept running through the polar night. My supervisor said they hadn't been inspected in 8 months, and with export contracts to fulfill, we needed to make sure they were following regulations. The flight from Anchorage took 4 hours in a small plane that bounced through Arctic winds like a tin can. Below us, the landscape was nothing but white ice stretching to the horizon. When we finally approached Prudhoe Bay, I could see the processing plant sitting on metal stilts over the frozen ocean. It looked like a space station dropped onto another planet. The pilot, an Inupiat man named Joe, helped me unload my equipment. "You sure you want to stay here 3 days?" he asked, looking at the massive building. "This place gives me the creeps. Always has." I laughed it off. "Just a bunch of Russians processing fish, nothing I haven't seen before." Joe shook his head. "Ma'am, Ibe, but I've been flying up here 20 years, and I've seen too many people go into that plant who never quite come back out the same." The plant manager, Alexei Petrov, met me at the entrance. He was a big man with gray hair and the kind of weathered face you get from working around ice and fish your whole life. His handshake was cold and rough, and he didn't smile when he welcomed me. "Inspector Volkov," he said in accented English. "You are Russian heritage, yes? Your name tells me this." "Third-generation American," I replied. "But yes, my grandfather came from Russia." Alexei nodded slowly. "Then perhaps you understand that some things are better left alone. Inspections in winter are bad luck. The fish are different in the darkness." I'd heard all kinds of worker superstitions over the years. Fishermen are some of the most superstitious people on Earth. "I'm just here to do my job," I told him. "Check your temperature logs, make sure your equipment is clean, document your processes. Standard stuff." The facility was enormous inside. 50,000 square feet of processing floors, freezer storage, and worker dormitories. The building sat directly over the ocean, and I could hear water moving beneath us through gaps in the ice. The sound was constant, like a heartbeat. Alexei showed me to my room in the administrative section. "You will eat with the workers," he said. "We are all family here during the winter. No one leaves until April, when the ice road opens again." That first night at dinner, I counted 23 workers, all Russian immigrants. They were polite but distant, speaking in rapid Russian among themselves and falling silent when I tried to join conversations. The food was good: fresh fish, vegetables that must have cost a fortune to fly in, and thick bread that reminded me of my grandmother's baking. But there was something in the air, a tensai, one like everyone was waiting for something to happen. After dinner, I went to my room to review the inspection checklist. That's when I first heard it, a sound coming from somewhere below. The building. It was musical, almost like singing, but wordless and haunting. The melody rose and fell like whale song, but more complex, more intelligent. I found Alexei in the break room having tea. "What's that sound?" I asked. He looked up from his cup. "Oh, that's normal. The fish sing in winter. It's just the current moving through ice making vibrations. Sound travels far in the cold." It didn't sound like water to me, but I wasn't an expert on Arctic acoustics. I went back to my room and tried to ignore it, but the singing continued all night. Even with my door closed and my ears covered, I could feel it more than hear it, like it was coming through the floor, through the walls, through my bones. The next morning, I started my inspection. The first thing I noticed was the fish themselves. They were supposed to be Arctic cod, but something was off. Their eyes were too large, almost the size of silver dollars, with pupils that looked almost human-shaped. Their mouths seemed wider than normal, and their fins had a strange, translucent quality. "Are these really Arctic cod?" I asked Victor, the floor supervisor. He shrugged. "Fish adapt to the darkness. Evolution happens fast in extreme conditions. These are winter fish. They develop different traits during the polar night." I'd never heard of fish changing that much seasonally, but I wasn't a marine biologist. I took photos and documented the unusual specimens for my report. The temperature logs were incomplete, minor violation. Some of the gutting equipment needed deeper cleaning, another minor issue. Standard problems I'd seen 100 times before. But watching the workers process the fish, I noticed something that made my skin crawl. The fish were still moving, not just muscle spasms after death. I'd seen plenty of that. These fish were moving with purpose, their fins twitching in rhythmic patterns, their mouths opening and closing like they were trying to speak. One worker, a young man with scarred hands, leaned close to a fish he was gutting and whispered in Russian, "They're calling. They're trying to call us down." Another worker quickly shushed him and pulled him away from the cutting station. "What did he mean by calling?" I asked Victor. Victor's face went pale. "Some of the workers, they get imaginative during the long darkness. Don't pay attention to such talk." But I was paying attention. That afternoon, I demanded a full explanation from Alexei. He sighed and closed the office door. The workers believe that fish caught during polar night are different, more aware. They don't die immediately like summer fish. Something about the darkness makes them conscious in a different way. We have to process them quickly or they start changing. Changing how? Growing things, limbs, vocal cords. The workers say if you listen too long to their calling, you start to change too. I wanted to laugh, but the serious expression on his face stopped me. "Alexei, that's scientifically impossible." "Is it?" He led me back to the processing floor, where a fresh batch of fish had just been brought in from the nets. "Watch." I watched. And what I saw made my scientific skepticism crumble. The fish on the conveyor belt were developing. Their fins were stretching and subdividing into finger-like projections. Their gill slits were expanding and multiplying. Most disturbing of all, their throats were swelling, developing the anatomical structure needed for vocalization. I took out my camera and started recording. This was impossible, but it was happening right in front of me. Fish don't metamorphose like this. They can't develop new organs in minutes. But I was watching it happen. I tried calling the USDA regional office from Alexei's satellite phone, but the connection kept dropping. The photos I attempted to email wouldn't upload. I was 400 miles from civilization, documenting what might be the most significant biological discovery. Couldn't reach anyone. That night, the singing was louder, more complex, and for the first time I could swear I heard words buried in the melody. Not English, not Russian, but something older, something that bypassed my ears and spoke directly to a part of my brain I didn't know existed. I couldn't sleep. At 3 a.m, I got dressed and went down to the processing floor. What I found there will haunt me forever. 6 workers were standing at the gutting stations, but they weren't working. They were swaying back and forth in perfect synchronization, their eyes closed, their mouths moving silently. On the tables in front of them, the fish they'd been processing were moving too, their newly developed appendages reaching toward the workers like they were trying to touch them. The singing was coming from the fish. Alexei found me there 20 minutes later and pulled me away. "Don't listen too long," he said urgently. "The fish want us to understand them. If you understand, you'll go down." "Down where?" He pointed to the floor. "Through the ice, into the water. We lose workers every winter this way." I researched the company's safety records that night. 23 workers had vanished over 15 years of winter operations, all listed as lost to exposure or fell through ice while working outside. But according to Alexei, that wasn't what happened. They went down voluntarily, he told me. The fish called them home. The next day, I inspected the freezer storage. Thousands of fish hung in rows, and they should have been completely frozen solid, but their eyes were moving, tracking my movement as I walked between the hanging rows. Their mouths opened and closed in perfect unison, and I realized the singing was coming from here, from fish that should have been dead for weeks. That's when I started feeling sick. It began with headaches and nausea, dizzy speech, yells that made me grab the nearest wall. I kept coughing up water, even though I wasn't drinking much. My skin felt dry and tight, like it was shrinking. When I checked my temperature, it was 96.8 degrees, too low. I was getting cold from the inside out. Looking at my hands that evening, I saw something that made me scream. There was webbing developing between my fingers. Subtle, but definitely there. The skin was becoming translucent, and I could see my veins and bones too clearly, like I was developing X-ray vision of my own body. I showed Alexei, and his face went grim. "It's starting. You've been here too long, listening too much." "What's starting? What's happening to me?" Alexei rolled up his sleeves and showed me his own arms. His fingers were completely webbed, and I could see gill slits forming along his forearms. "I've been transforming for 8 years, he said calmly. "Every winter, a little more. I can hold my breath underwater for 40 minutes now. Maybe next year I won't come back up." "This is insane. I need to get out of here. Weather's closed in. No flights for at least a week, maybe 2. I was trapped, and I was changing. Over the next 3 days, my transformation accelerated. I couldn't stop drinking water, gallons of it. My body craved it like an addiction. My skin was drying out, cracking and bleeding, but the more water I drank, the better I felt. I was transitioning from land-based to water-based biology, and I could feel my lungs changing, growing new structures. When I coughed, blood came up mixed with salt water. 3 workers visited me in my room on the 4th night. They showed me their own changes: fully webbed hands, gill slits on their necks, legs that had started fusing together at the knees. Their eyes had changed too, growing larger and moving to the sides of their heads. "We're going down tonight," one of them said in broken English. "Come with us. It stops hurting once you go down." I screamed at them to leave me alone, but part of me wanted to follow, and I was starting to understand what it was saying. "Come home. Come down. The water is warm. The pressure is comfort. You were always one of us. Human form was just temporary." I spent that night researching frantically on the plant's internet connection. I found scientific papers about deep ocean organisms in the Arctic, bioluminescent, highly intelligent creatures that might have been living under the polar ice for millions of years. Some papers theorized they occasionally surfaced when they detected human presence above. That's when I understood the horrible truth. This wasn't a fish processing plant. It was a recruitment center. The creatures in the deep ocean were collecting humans, transforming them through some kind of biological infection carried by the fish. The workers who disappeared hadn't fallen through the ice. They had been converted into something aquatic and joined the things living in the darkness below. My legs were fusing. I couldn't walk properly anymore. My knees bent the wrong way and my feet were flattening into flippers. When I finally got through to the USDA office, they thought I was having a psychotic break. My supervisor promised to send help when the weather cleared, but I knew it would be too late. The singing had become words I could understand perfectly. "Come down, come home. The darkness below is peaceful. You're one of us. You always were. Return to the deep." I land, my new physiology demanding the water below. I jumped. The water was shockingly warm. Geothermal vents somewhere in the depths were heating the Arctic Ocean. My new body was perfectly designed for this environment, efficient, powerful, graceful. I swam down easily, and the singing surrounded me like a welcoming embrace. What I found in the depths changed everything I thought I knew about humanity. There were thousands of them, beings that had once been human, all transformed, living in heated caves and around thermal vents beneath the ice. They had built a civilization down here, glowing structures, organized communities, technology adapted for underwater use. They greeted me telepathically, their thoughts flowing into my mind like warm water. They showed me the truth. They weren't victims of some alien predator. They were evolution in action. The fish creatures in the deepest parts of the ocean weren't invaders. They were our predecessors. An older branch of humanity that had returned to the sea millions of years ago. During the polar night, when the surface world becomes as dark as the deep ocean, the barriers between our worlds thin. Transformation becomes possible. It's not infection. It's homecoming. A return to our aquatic heritage. I met beings who had been human in the 1800s, completely transformed now, but still intelligent, still retaining their personalities and memories. They showed me the plan. Every winter, more humans would join them. Eventually, enough would transform to establish permanent cities throughout the world's oceans. Humanity would reclaim the seas. My transformation completed over the following months. My legs fused into a powerful tail. My arms became fins with manipulating appendages that worked better than my old hands. My skull reshaped to accommodate a brain that could process underwater acoustics and pressure changes. I was saint, ill-intelligent, still myself, but I was aquatic now. I work at the plant from below now, guiding the fishing operations, making sure the right fish surface, the ones that carry the calling song. I help select which workers are ready for transformation. I've become a recruiter for my new species. My USDA report did surface online eventually. It went viral for a few days before being dismissed as an elaborate hoax. The photos were called fake. The agency disavowed me, releasing an official statement that Dmitry Volkov died in an ice accident in January 2025, body never recovered. But the report reached some people who were ready to hear the truth. People who had always felt called to water, who never fit quite right in land-based life. Some of them applied for jobs at Arctic processing plants. The cycle continues. I've been underwater for 3 years now. I've forgotten how to walk, can't remember what air feels like in my lungs. My children's faces are fuzzy memories. My human life feels like a dream from someone else's mind. But I'm not alone. The colony has grown to over 4,000 beings, connected by tunnels beneath the Arctic ice. We're preparing for 2030, when we plan to reveal ourselves to the surface world. We'll offer transformation to anyone who wants to come home to the water. I have 3 children now, born aquatic, perfect for this environment. And I have a message for my human children, recorded and set to release when we make first contact. I'm alive. I'm happy. I didn't die. I transformed into something better. The ocean is calling all of us home. When you're ready, come to Prudhoe Bay. Listen to the fish singing. We're waiting for you below. The water is warm here. The pressure is comfortable. And in the darkness beneath the ice, humanity's true future is growing, one transformed soul at a time. My name was Dmitry Volkov, USDA Fishery Inspector. Now I'm something much better. I'm home. My name is Yuki Tanaka, and I've been a wedding photographer in Seattle for 8 years. I started with a basic Canon camera and a dream, working weekends while doing graphic design during the week. I've shot over 200 weddings, beach ceremonies in the rain, mountain venues with no power, bridezillas who changed their minds 6 times about everything. I thought I'd seen it all. But what happened in December 2023 at a remote Alaska lodge changed everything I thought I knew about photography, about time, and about what happens when love gets bound to something much darker than promises. I should have listened to Thomas, the cook. I should have put my camera down and walked away. But I was a photographer, and photographers capture moments. I just never thought about what happens when those moments capture you back. The booking email came in November. $15,000 for one weekend, more than I usually made in 3 months. Olivia Chen and Preston Williams, tech executives from San Francisco, wanted a destination wedding in Alaska's Brooks Range. They specifically requested the winter solstice, December 21st. "We want that authentic polar night aesthetic," Olivia wrote. "Aurora photos, dramatic darkness, something no one else has done." I needed this job. My equipment was aging, my apartment lease was up for renewal, and my portfolio needed something spectacular. Alaska in December was risky. Harsh weather, expensive flights, difficult lighting conditions. But $15,000 could change everything. The lodge was only accessible by helicopter from Fairbanks. As we flew over endless white wilderness, the pilot shouted over the engine noise. "Weather's moving in after tomorrow, might be stuck there a few extra days." I nodded, watching the landscape below. No roads, no towns, just snow and trees stretching to the horizon. My camera bag felt heavy on my lap, packed with extra batteries, memory cards, and my best lenses. I'd researched aurora photography for weeks, studying exposure settings and timing charts. The Midnight Sun Lodge appeared suddenly, a cluster of dark wood buildings around a main hall, smoke rising from chimneys, warm light spilling from windows. It looked like something from a fairy tale, elegant and remote. Exactly what wealthy clients paid premium prices for. The lodge staff was mostly Inupiaq, locals who'd worked there for years. They were polite but distant with the wedding party, serving meals and maintaining the buildings without much conversation. The head cook was an older man named Thomas Kapianak. He had kind eyes but seemed troubled whenever the wedding was mentioned. During my first dinner at the lodge, I photographed the rehearsal dinner setup. The dining room was beautiful. Exposed beams, stone fireplace, candles everywhere. Olivia and Preston's guests were drinking expensive wine and laughing, everyone excited about the unusual venue choice. Thomas was serving soup when he stopped beside my chair. "You're the photographer," he said quietly. "Yes, sir. Getting some setup shots for tomorrow." He glanced at my camera, then at the happy couple across the room. "Bad luck to marry during the dark time. Spirits get confused, bind people wrong." I smiled politely. "Well, they specifically wanted the solstice, the symbolism of bringing light to darkness." Thomas's expression didn't change. Darkness doesn't like to give up what it holds. I thanked him and went back to photographing the party. Local superstitions were common at destination weddings. Part of the charm, really. Clients loved hearing about ancient customs and mysterious warnings. Made for great story captions on social media. But Thomas's words stuck with me as I reviewed my shots that night. The photos looked perfect. Warm, candlelight, happy faces, expensive decorations. Everything a luxury wedding should be. I uploaded them to my laptop and started planning tomorrow's shot list. The ceremony was scheduled for midnight. Olivia had insisted on the exact timing. "It has to be at the darkest moment," she'd explained during our consultation call, "when December 21st becomes December 22nd. Symbolic death and rebirth." I'd photographed plenty of unusual timing requests, sunrise ceremonies, full moon weddings, even one couple who got married during a solar eclipse. Timing was just another creative challenge. My room was small but comfortable, with a view of the snow-covered clearing where tomorrow's ceremony would take place. I could see the wooden arch they'd built, decorated with pine branches and white flowers. Portable heaters were positioned around the area, and strings of lights created a magical atmosphere. I fell asleep reviewing my equipment one more time. Everything was ready. December 21st dawned gray and cold. The sun barely rose above the horizon before starting its descent again. By 4 p.m. it was fully dark outside, stars visible through the clear sky. The wedding party spent the day relaxing, drinking champagne, and getting ready. I photographed the preparation process. Olivia's makeup artist working by lamplight, Preston adjusting his fur-lined tuxedo jacket, guests bundling up in expensive winter gear. Around 10 p.m. I noticed the aurora starting. Faint green curtains in the northern sky, exactly what Olivia had hoped for. I stepped outside to test my camera settings, adjusting for the extreme cold and low light conditions. The aurora was stronger than the forecast predicted. Brilliant green and purple bands dancing across the sky, shifting and pulsing like something alive. Through my camera lens, the colors were even more vibrant. This was going to be spectacular. Thomas appeared beside me in the snow. "Storm coming after midnight," he said, pointing at the horizon. "Good thing ceremony's quick." "Actually, I was hoping you could tell me more about those local toms you mentioned, the binding spirits." He was quiet for a long moment, watching the aurora. "Old stories. When the darkness is deepest, when the lights dance strongest, the boundary gets thin. Things that shouldn't touch our world can reach through." "What kind of things?" "Spirits who got lost in the darkness. Spirits who want to stay in our world. They look for ceremonies, for binding words, for ways to anchor themselves." He looked at my camera. "If the ceremony goes wrong, if something feels wrong, leave immediately. Don't photograph the binding. The darkness steals what's captured during sacred time." I lowered my camera. "Thomas, are you trying to tell me something specific?" But he was already walking back toward the lodge. "Just old stories," he called over his shoulder. "Be careful what you capture tonight." At 11:30, the wedding party gathered in the clearing. Everyone wore heavy coats and boots, their breath visible in the frigid air. The temperature was nearly 30 below zero, but the portable heaters created warm zones around the wooden arch. The officiant was a man named Robert Siku, who Olivia and Preston had hired specifically for his indigenous background. He wore traditional clothing mixed with modern winter gear and carried what looked like ceremonial items in a leather bag. I positioned myself to capture both the ceremony and the aurora in the background. The lighting was challenging but manageable. My camera battery indicator showed full charge despite the cold. At exactly midnight, the ceremony began. Robert's voice carried clearly in the cold air as he spoke about love and commitment, about the darkness giving way to longer days. The aurora intensified behind him, becoming brighter and more active than I'd ever seen in photographs online. Through my camera viewfinder, the scene was magical. Olivia and Preston exchanged vows with the dancin', G-lights framing them perfectly. Their guests stood in a circle, faces lit by aurora glow and heater warmth. I was getting once-in-a-lifetime shots. But something felt strange. The aurora was pulsing in rhythm with Robert's chanting, which had shifted from English to what I assumed was Inupiaq. The green and purple lights seemed to be moving closer, descending toward the ground. I kept shooting. This was exactly the kind of unique content that would make my career. "By the power of the long darkness," Robert announced, raising his hands toward the aurora, "you are bound." Olivia and Preston kissed. Everyone cheered and applauded. The aurora suddenly dropped like a solid curtain, touching the ground around our entire group. The light was touching us. And then something changed. Time hiccuped. Everyone staggered like they'd missed a step. The aurora receded back to its normal height, but something felt fundamentally wrong. My camera was still recording, but the timestamp showed 12:00 a.m. again. Robert looked disturbed. He said something in Inupiaq that sounded urgent, almost panicked. Thomas came running from the lodge, shouting, "No, no, no," as he reached us. "What's wrong?" Olivia laughed, still holding Preston's hands. "Was that part of the ceremony?" Thomas reached us and stopped, breathing hard. In English, he said, "You completed the binding during the darkness spiral. You've married them to the night itself, not to each other. The ceremony must be undone before midnight or it sets permanently." Preston laughed. "We're bound to the night? That sounds pretty metal." But Robert was gone. I looked around the clearing, but the officiant had simply vanished into the darkness. Thomas's face went pale when I told him. "That's bad," Thomas said. "The man knew what he did. That officiant wasn't legitimate, was a trickster spirit wearing human form. Real shamans don't perform ceremonies during the spiral, the darkest hour when reality thins." The wedding party treated it as entertainment. They were drunk and celebrating, heading back inside for dinner and dancing. but I felt cold dread in my stomach. Thomas's fear was genuine. Something had happened that shouldn't have. I followed everyone inside, still photographing their reactions, but my hands were shaking. When I reviewed the ceremony photos on my camera's LCD screen, I saw something impossible. There were extra people in the background, maybe 20 additional figures standing behind the guests, their faces obscured but wearing old-fashioned wedding clothes from different eras. Formal suits from the 1950s, flowing dresses from the 1970s, shoulder pads from the 1980s. They hadn't been there during the ceremony. I would have noticed. I showed the photos to Thomas during the reception. He went completely pale. "The other brides and grooms," he whispered, "all married during the spiral. They're still here." At 2 a.m. I was photographing the last dance when the lodge lights flickered, and suddenly it was midnight again. I was standing in the same spot in the clearing, camera raised, watching Olivia and Preston exchange the exact same vows. Everyone was repeating identical actions, speaking identical words. The aurora dropped like a curtain. Time hiccuped. Thomas ran toward us shouting, "No, no, no!" Deja vu, but real. I tried to shout a warning, but my mouth wouldn't work. I was locked into photographing, my body moving automatically to capture each moment. The ceremony completed identically. Everyone went inside. I took the same photos of the same reception. At 2 a.m., the lights flickered again. Midnight. Ceremony beginning. Same vows, same kiss, same aurora drop. I was aware now, but trapped. Everyone else reset with each loop. But I remembered. I was the observer, the photographer, somehow outside the binding, but forced to document it forever. Loop 3, I tried different actions. Didn't raise my camera. Tried to run. My body moved automatically back to position. Cameras, A in hand, shooting the ceremony whether I wanted to or not. Loop 4, I noticed Thomas was also remembering. I could see it in his eyes when he ran toward us. He'd been through this before. When he reached the group, he mouthed midnight deadline before time reset again. We had until midnight of December 22nd to break this, or it would become permanent. Loop 7, I started noticing details. The ghost wedding parties in my photos were from different decades. I could date them by clothing styles, 1950s, 1970s, 1990s, 2010s, all trapped in their own ceremonies, all repeating forever. This had been happening for decades at this location. Between loops, I had microseconds of freedom. Photographers observe. We're not fully part of the ceremony. I used those moments to study my camera, to look closer at the spirit officiant. In the photos, his face was wrong. Multiple faces overlapping, ancient and shifting. Loop 12, I managed to reach Thomas during the reset moment. "We need to destroy the marriage certificate," he whispered urgently. "Burn it before real midnight. Break the binding." The certificate was in Olivia's room, but the lodge geography was wrong now. Hallways extended infinitely. Rooms looped back on themselves. Time was bent here, and space was bent with it. Loop 20, other trapped people started appearing. A photographer from 2015 named James, still carrying his old camera. A cook from 1982. A guest from 1998. All people who had been observers at cursed weddings. All still here, repeating their roles, trying to warn new victims. James had been looping for 8 years. "I tried everything," he told me between resets. "The only escape is to stop the ceremony from completing. But we can't change the past events, only the present moment. We need to reach midnight of December 22nd and burn the certificate in the exact moment of transition." By loop 35, I was losing my mind. I'd photographed this wedding hundreds of times. Every smile, every kiss, every moment burned into my brain. I started screaming during loops, but my bod. They still performed the photography while I screamed internally. Thomas taught me meditation techniques, indigenous practices for maintaining self during spiritual assault. He'd been doing this since 1979. Thousands of loops, but still sane, still functional, adapted to his endless role. Loop 50, we realized Olivia and Preston were changing. Each loop, they looked slightly different, aging backwards, growing younger. The binding was erasing them, consuming their timeline. Eventually, they'd disappear entirely, become pure ceremony with no actual people. Loop 62, we finally reached Olivia's room. The marriage certificate was there, but protected by aurora light, burning cold to the touch. Thomas tried to grab it and his hand nearly froze solid. James suggested using my camera. Photographs steal moments, trap them. Maybe you can photograph the certificate in a way that captures and nullifies it. Loop 71, I photographed the certificate with specific intent, focusing all my will and photographer's skill into capturing its essence. The photo came out completely black, like it had absorbed the certificate's energy. The document flickered. The loop stuttered. Time hiccuped between 1:30 a.m. and 12:15 a.m. and 1:45 a.m. The ceremony fragments were playing out of order. I kept photographing the certificate each loop, draining it, pulling its power into my camera. Loop 80, the certificate was fading, becoming transparent. The loops were shortening, 30 minutes, then 20. The wedding was collapsing. Olivia and Preston flickered between ages, unstuck in time. Loop 95, my camera was full. 10,000 photos of the wedding, the certificate, the loops. My memory card was corrupted, glitching, showing images that never happened, images from other trapped weddings. My camera had become a repository of cursed ceremonies. Delete everything, Thomas S. Aid. Purge the camera. Release all the trapped moments. It'll break the loops but erase all record. No one will remember these weddings. I hesitated. This was my best work, my career-making portfolio. James begged me. I've been trapped 8 years. People are suffering, repeating, dissolving. You need to sacrifice your work to free them. Loop 100. I deleted everything, formatted the memory card, erased every photo. The camera flashed white. Aurora light poured from it. The lodge shook. Time splintered. Everyone screamed as the loops shattered. I woke up in my room. Sunlight was streaming through the window. My camera sat on the dresser, memory card completely blank. It was December 20th, the day before the wedding. Thomas greeted me at breakfast, his eyes showing recognition. James, the photographer from 2015, was leaving the lodge, nodding at me knowingly. They remembered, but time had changed. I tried to warn Olivia and Preston, but they didn't exist. The couple who had hired me was different people with different names. The December 21st midnight ceremony was canceled. Had never been planned. The timeline shifted to avoid the spiral ceremony. Only the observers remembered. I photographed a normal wedding on December 23rd. Beautiful, standard, no aurora ceremony. The couple was happy. The photos were lovely but mundane. I felt hollow. My greatest work was deleted, never existed. I'd saved lives by erasing my art. Thomas gave me a small carved figure afterward, an Inupiaq protection symbol. You did well. Freed 9 ceremonies, 47 people. They're living their lives now in corrected timelines. You'll never see evidence of your good work. That's the price. I returned to Seattle to find my life subtly different. Small changes. My apartment was arranged differently. I had photos on my wall from jobs I didn't remember doing. The timeline had shifted, adjusting my life to the new reality where those cursed weddings never happened. James messaged me from Portland. He was a successful wedding photographer now, living normal. We're the guardians now, he wrote. We remember the ceremonies that didn't happen. We prevent them. He sent me a list of dates and locations to avoid. I researched and found patterns. Certain dates during polar nights were dangerous across Alaska, winter solstice especially. Wedding ceremonies performed in darkness with aurora present created binding loops. It had happened hundreds of times. Most couples simply disappeared into repeated time. I became an expert. Every winter, I travel to Alaska, book photography jobs during dangerous dates, then convince couples to change timing, reschedule, move indoors, whatever it takes to avoid the spirit bindings. I prevent loops before they happen. But December 21st came around again. Another lodge, another couple wanting midnight aurora ceremony. I was photographing the rehearsal when I saw Thomas. Same face, different name, cooking at this lodge too. He was in his own loop, cursed to cook at lodges forever, warning people who wouldn't listen. That's when I realized the true horror. The observers don't fully escape. We're bound differently. Thomas is stuck as the eternal warning cook. Previous photographers are stuck warning the next generation. I'm now stuck preventing ceremonies, bound to Alaska winters forever. I tried to leave, booked a December flight to Hawaii, but circumstances always prevent it. Missed flights, weather delays, emergency job offers. I'm geographically bound during polar nights. Must stay in Alaska. Must serve as guardian. This is my loop now. It's better than repeating a 2-hour ceremony infinitely. At least I'm moving, living, helping people. I've established a network with other guardians, photographers, caterers, officiants who remember. We coordinate to protect couples across Alaska. 10 years later, I'm legendary in the industry as the photographer who never works December solstice. Coop, let's try to book me specifically for that date. I always decline, refer them to others, spend every December 21st traveling between lodges, warning people, showing them my blank memory card that once held 10,000 photos of a wedding that never happened. Thomas still appears at lodges, always the cook, always the warner. We nod at each other, two guardians maintaining the boundary between celebration and curse. My portfolio is deliberately modest now. I've turned down major publications, can't explain why my December work is always unavailable. Colleagues think I'm eccentric, but couples who were supposed to marry on December 21st and didn't, who changed dates at my insistence, they live full lives, age normally, have children, never knowing they avoided eternity in a 2-hour loop. I photograph summer weddings on the solstice now, the longest day, bright and warm. I think about balance, how darkness binds and light frees. I take thousands of photos and keep them all. When December comes, I return to Alaska like salmon returning home, drawn by something stronger than choice. I visit every lodge where ceremonies might happen, camera ready, memory card empty, prepared to delete everything again if needed. I'm an artist who creates only to destroy. A photographer who captures moments specifically to prevent them from becoming eternal. Bound to Alaska's darkness, not by loops, but by purpose. Guardian of the spiral hour. When the aurora drops and time becomes negotiable and love can bind people not to each other, but to endless repetition in the coldest, darkest night. My name is Derek Nash, and I've been a wildlife biologist for 18 years. I started right out of college at Colorado State, studying elk herds in the Rockies. Over the years, I've tracked everything from mountain lions to grizzly bears, spent months alone in the wilderness, and handled situations that would terrify most people. I've been charged by angry moose, survived 3 blizzards, and once spent 2 weeks eating nothing but energy bars when a supply drop got delayed. My wife Sarah always worried, but I loved the work. The isolation, the data, the chance to understand animal behavior patterns that nobody else had documented. But what happened in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge during the polar night of 2023 changed everything I thought I knew about what lives in the wilderness. What I encountered up there wasn't in any textbook, wasn't covered in any training program, and definitely wasn't something the Department of Interior warned me about when they offered me the contract. I should have listened to Sarah when she begged me not to take the job. The assignment seemed routine enough. The department needed someone to survey caribou populations during their winter migration through the Brooks Range. 3 months of solo fieldwork, tracking herd movements using trail cameras and GPS collars. The pay was excellent, double my normal rate, because of the conditions. 24-hour darkness, temperatures hitting -40, and complete isolation 90 miles from the nearest village. I'd done solo work before, but never during the polar night. In November, the sun disappears completely up there. For 3 months, it's just darkness, broken only by the northern lights and whatever artificial light you bring with you. The department flew me in by helicopter on November 15th, dropping me at a research cabin that would be my home base. The pilot, a grizzled Gatavars. I named Tom, looked nervous as we unloaded my gear. "You sure about this, Doc?" he asked, eyeing the endless white landscape. "It's different up here when the sun's gone. Gets to people." I assured him I'd be fine. The cabin was well stocked. I had satellite communication, and supply drops were scheduled every 2 weeks. What could go wrong? The first week went exactly as planned. I set up 40 trail cameras across a 50-mile radius, each one equipped with infrared triggers designed to capture caribou movement patterns. The cameras were military-grade, built to handle extreme cold, and programmed to send data back to my laptop via satellite uplink. I checked them every 3 days using my snowmobile, navigating with GPS and night vision goggles. The darkness was disorienting, like being inside a cave the size of Alaska, but manageable. That's when I first saw it on camera number 7. I was reviewing the day's footage when something caught my attention. The camera had triggered at 2:47 a.m., showing the usual heat signatures of a small caribou herd. But there was something else in the frame. A heat signature too large for caribou, standing upright on 2 legs about 200 yards away from the herd. The thermal imaging showed it clearly, bipedal, maybe 8 feet tall, just standing there watching the animals. My first thought was hunter. Maybe someone from one of the villages, though they'd need special permits to be in the refuge. But when I snowmobiled out to check the location the next day, I couldn't find any tracks. The snow was disturbed where the caribou had been, but no human footprints, no snowmobile tracks, nothing to explain how someone got there or left. 3 days later, camera 12 captured the same figure. Different location, 15 miles from camera 7, same night, same posture. Standing motionless for 40 minutes before the caribou sky uttered and ran. I pulled out my calculator and did the math. Even on a snowmobile, nothing could cover 15 miles of rough terrain in the time gap between the camera triggers. Unless there were 2 people, but that didn't explain the lack of tracks at either location. Camera 18 changed everything. This time, the figure was moving. The footage was disturbing in a way that made my hands shake as I watched it. The thing moved in bursts, incredibly fast, covering 30 yards in what looked like 2 seconds, then standing perfectly still again. I slowed the footage down frame by frame, studying the movement. The limbs bent at angles that weren't right for human biomechanics. Arms too long, torso too narrow, head too large. And then I realized something that made my blood run cold. The heat signature showed bare skin. Whatever this was, it wasn't wearing clothes in minus 40-degree weather. That was impossible for human survival. This wasn't a person. Over the next week, more cameras captured it, always near caribou herds, always watching, never attacking. Just observing with an intelligence that was obvious even through the grainy thermal footage. I counted the appearances across 20 different cameras and realized with growing dread that it was one creature, not multiple, moving across vast distances every single night, following the caribou migration patterns like it was studying them, like I was studying them. Then I found the kill site. 3 caribou, dead in the snow. But this wasn't wolves or bears. The damage was surgical. Throats torn out with precision, organs removed cleanly. The bodies were arranged in a perfect line facing north. This showed intelligence, purpose, ritual behavior. I photographed everything with shaking hands, my breath forming ice crystals on my camera lens. That night I reviewed all the footage chronologically, and the terrible truth became clear. The creature had been present since my very first day. It was already here when I arrived, watching me set up the cameras. In the early footage, I could see it in a background of several shots, a pale shape against the snow that I'd dismissed as equipment or landscape features. It was moving in a spiral pattern around my camp, getting closer each night. Now it was within 2 miles of the cabin. I wasn't studying caribou, I was being studied. Camera 23 was the closest to my cabin, positioned just half a mile away to monitor the approaches to my camp. When I checked its footage, my laptop nearly slipped from my numb fingers. The creature was walking directly toward the camera, staring into the lens. The face was human-like but wrong in every possible way. No eyes, just smooth skin where eyes should be. A mouth too wide, filled with too many teeth. This was predator reconnaissance. It was learning about my equipment, my methods, my patterns. I grabbed my satellite phone with shaking fingers and called for emergency extraction. The dispatcher sounded skeptical as I tried to explain what I was seeing. "Sounds like a bear, sir." Bears can stand on their hind legs, especially when they're curious about... "Bears don't move at 40 miles per hour, I shouted into the phone. "Bears don't have human hands. Bears don't arrange their kills in geometric patterns." There was a long pause. Weather's bad up there, sir. Helicopter can't fly until conditions improve. Probably 5 days minimum. 5 days. I was trapped with that thing circling my camp, getting closer every night. That first night I heard footsteps on my roof, slow and deliberate, pacing back and forth, testing the structure. I sat in the dark with my rifle aimed at the ceiling, listening to those impossible footsteps. Too heavy for a person, too light for a bear, something in between. Calculating. Then it tried the door. The handle moved slowly, testing the lock mechanism. I had my rifle trained on the door, heart hammering so loud I was sure the thing could hear him. The handle stopped moving, and the footsteps shifted to the window. I watched through my scope as a massive hand pressed against the glass. The fingers were too long, with no palm print visible. The skin looked smooth, almost like a seal's. For 3 hours it stood at my window. I watched through the rifle scope, afraid to move, afraid to breathe. 8 feet tall, gaunt and pale, no visible eyes, but its head tracked my movements inside the cabin like it could see through the walls. Echolocation, maybe, or thermal sensing. It was studying me the same way I'd been studying the caribou. At 4 in the morning, it walked away. I checked camera 23 later and saw it on the footage, walking back toward the caribou grounds. In the infrared, it burned bright white, generating massive heat despite the cold. Its metabolism was alien. Nothing earthly should function like this. The next day, searching through the cabin for anything that might help me understand what I was dealing with, I found research notes filed in a drawer labeled Discontinued Observations. Entries from 1987, 1994, 2003, all describing the same creature. The local Inupiaq called it the Watcher. The entries stopped abruptly. The last one, from 2003, said, "It took my cameras. It knows I'm documenting it, leaving tomorrow if I can." The signature was Dr. Michael Torres. I realized that previous researchers had encountered this thing before, but none of them had published their findings. Either they'd been silenced, hadn't survived, or simply couldn't prove it. I downloaded all my footage to multiple drives and uploaded encrypted files to a cloud server before my satellite bandwidth cut out. If something happened to me, the evidence had to survive. The next morning, all 40 of my trail cameras went offline simultaneously. Every single one showed no signal on my monitoring system. I fired up the snowmobile and raced to the nearest camera location. What I found there made my knees weak. The camera had been dismantled carefully, wires cut with surgical precision, the casing opened, and the SD card removed. The creature had taken the evidence. It understood technology. I raced from camera to camera, finding the same thing at every location. 20 cameras destroyed in a single night, the creature working in a methodical grid pattern, moving at impossible speeds. Finally, I found tracks. Massive 3-toed prints, each toe ending in a claw, with a spacing that suggested a 15-foot stride. The tracks led to a cave entrance I'd never noticed before. Against every instinct screaming at me to run, I followed them. I had to know what this thing was. The cave angled downward, the walls scraped smooth by something large passing through repeatedly. Deeper inside, I found bones. Hundreds of caribou skeletons, neatly stacked like a larder. And then I found the human remains. 4 skulls in various stages of decomposition, clothing scraps from different eras scattered around them. One jacket had a name patch, Dr. Michael Torres, 2003, the researcher who'd written the last journal entry. My stomach dropped as I realized I was standing in the creature's den. Behind me, I heard breathing. I turned and saw it 20 feet away, blocking my exit. Up close, the face was pure nightmare fuel. No nose, no eyes, just smooth, pale skin and that massive mouth. It opened its mouth and made a sound like clicking mixed with grinding stone. Echolocation. It was seeing me through sound. I shot it. 3 rounds center mass from my rifle. Dark blood sprayed across the cave wall and it staggered backward. But it didn't fall. It didn't die. Instead, it ran at me, covering the 20 feet in less than 2 seconds. I dove sideways into a narrow side tunnel, the only escape route I could see. The creature couldn't fit, but it reached in with those impossibly long arms, claws scraping against my jacket. I crawled through the tunnel on my belly, jagged rock tearing my clothes, listening to the creature's circle above, looking for another entrance. It knew these caves intimately. This was its home. I emerged outside about a mile from the main entrance and ran for my snowmobile, the creature's clicking echoing across the tundra as it triangulated my position. The ride back to the cabin was the longest 30 miles of my life. The creature kept pace with my snowmobile, running alongside at 45 miles per hour without even breathing hard. It was playing with me, testing me. It could have caught me any time it wanted. This was sport. I barricaded myself in the cabin, pushing furniture against the door, loading every weapon I had. 3 rifles, 2 handguns, boxes of ammunition. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the guns steady. The creature circled the cabin all night, testing every wall, every window, learning the structure and looking for weaknesses. At one point, it tore a chunk of the roof off. I fired through the hole, heard it make that grinding click sound. Maybe pain, maybe laughter. The hole was covered with snow from outside, sealing me back in. Then it started dropping things down the chimney. Caribou organs, hearts, livers, kidneys, still warm. They landed in my fire, filling the cabin with a smell that made me vomit. The message was clear. I kill when I want. You can't stop me. These could be your organs. For 3 days, I lived under siege. The creature came every night, pacing, testing, leaving gifts. Pieces of caribou, once a human femur. I was starving but afraid to leave, surviving on melted snow and canned food. I'd lost 15 pounds and hadn't slept more than 20 minutes at a time. On the 3rd night, it spoke. Not English, but mimicry. It repeated my voice from recordings it must have heard. Hello, this is Derek Nash, beginning day 1 of Caribou Survey. Hearing my own voice coming from that thing's throat broke something inside me. I screamed until my voice was raw. The helicopter was supposed to come the next day. I just had to survive 1 more night. I duct-taped weapons to my hand, and so I couldn't drop them, swallowed caffeine pills to stay awake, watched every angle. The creature was silent that night. No pacing, no sounds. Somehow the absence was more terrifying than its presence. At 3 in the morning, the door exploded inward. The creature had torn through my barricade like it was paper. It filled the small cabin, and I shot everything I had. Both rifles, all the pistol rounds. It was hit multiple times but kept coming, grabbing me by the leg, dragging me toward the door. I was screaming, clawing at the floor when I remembered the flare gun. I grabbed it and shot the creature in the face. The flare stuck in its mouth, burning magnesium bright. It dropped me and reeled back, making that grinding click sound continuously. But then it did something that destroyed my last shred of hope. It tore the flare out of its mouth and swallowed it, ate the burning magnesium like candy. It was showing me that weapons were irrelevant. The creature picked me up by the throat, lifting me effortlessly. I stared into that eyeless face, watching the mouth open impossibly wide, unhinged like a snake's jaw. I could see down its throat, glowing faintly with bioluminescent organs. It brought me close, smelling me, learning me. Then it dropped me and walked out of the cabin. The helicopter found me the next morning, curled in the corner, covered in blood and filth. The pilot radioed for medical evacuation. I spent 2 months in psychiatric care in Fairbanks, diagnosed with severe PTSD and psychotic break. The official report said I was attacked by a grizzly bear. My footage was dismissed as corrupted files showing digital artifacts. My career was over. My marriage barely survived. I tried to warn other researchers, posting online about the Watcher, uploading what footage I had left. Most people called it a hoax. A few believers asked for more proof, but I had none. The creature had taken it all, destroyed it methodically. 3 months later, I saw a news article. Researcher missing in Alaska, search suspended. Dr. Sarah Chen from UC Berkeley. I'd tried to warn her, begged her not to go to the Brooks Range. Her last radio contact was her screaming about something in her camp. Someone sent me an SD card with footage from Chen's camera. It showed 3 of the Watchers now, different sizes, communicating with clicks and grinding sounds. coordinating as they systematically destroyed her equipment. They're multiplying. Every winter during the polar night, the Watchers emerge from their tunnels to hunt. Hairless, pale giants moving at impossible speeds through the Arctic darkness, clicking their echolocation, coordinating their hunts. They're apex predators that evolved alongside humans in the cold and dark where we never looked. Patient hunters that learned to prey on us before we invented fire, perfecting their techniques for 10,000 years in the place where the sun abandons the earth. The clicking never stops echoing across the tundra, and every winter, when researchers like me venture into their domain, we become what we've always been to them: prey. My name is Cassie Torres, and I've been flying search and rescue helicopters in Alaska for 12 years. I got my commercial pilot's license at 23, did 2 tours with the Coast Guard, then joined Alaska Search and Rescue when I was 25. I've pulled 73 people out of situations they shouldn't have survived. Ice fishermen who fell through frozen lakes, plane crashes in the Brooks Range, hikers lost in whiteout conditions. My crew trusts me completely because I've never lost anyone on my watch. Winter is my busiest season. The polar night brings out the worst situations, and I'm the one they call when someone needs saving in the dark. December in Alaska means flying in complete darkness. The sun doesn't rise above the horizon for weeks. Everything is instruments, thermal imaging, and searchlights cutting through black air. I've done hundreds of night rescues. The darkness doesn't scare me anymore, or at least it didn't. December 10th started like any other shift. I was in the ready room at our base in Fairbanks, drinking terrible coffee and going over weather reports with my co-pilot Jake. He'd only been with us for 8 months, still nervous about flying in polar night conditions. My crew chief, Marcus, was running pre-flight checks on our bird, a Sikorsky S-92 that I'd been flying for 6 years. I knew every sound she made, every vibration, every quirk. The emergency call came in at 4:47 p.m. Distress beacon from the Brooks Range. Tourist party, 5 people, missing for 3 days. The beacon had just activated, which was strange because modern beacons turn on automatically in emergencies. These people had been missing for 72 hours, and we were only hearing from them now. The coordinates put them 120 miles into wilderness. The weather was marginal, but flyable. Jake looked at me nervously. "That's pretty far out, Anton. The weather's supposed to get worse." "We have a 6-hour window," I said. "We go now or we don't go at all." Marcus finished the pre-flight. "Bird's ready whenever you are, boss." We lifted off at 5:15 p.m. into absolute darkness. Flying in polar night is like flying inside a closet. You can't see the ground, can't see the horizon, can't see anything except your instruments glowing green in the cockpit. The Brooks Range is some of the most dangerous terrain in North America. Jagged mountains, narrow valleys, extreme downdrafts that can slam you into a cliff face before you even know it's there. Jake was quiet, watching the instruments, hands tight on his controls. Marcus was in back, organizing rescue gear. Medical supplies, warming blankets, emergency rations, standard procedure. We reached the beacon coordinates at 6:43 p.m. I brought us down to 200 feet. Marcus hit the searchlight, swept the area below us. Nothing. Just empty tundra, snow and ice stretching in every direction. No people, no camp, no wreckage. "Beacon's strong, though," Marcus said over the radio. "Signals coming from right below us, 10-meter accuracy." I circled the area 3 times. The beacon was pinging every second loud and clear on our equipment. But there was nothing down there. Then the signal moved. It jumped 200 yards east in less than a second. That's impossible. Beacons don't move that fast unless they're in a vehicle, and we'd see a vehicle on thermal imaging. I followed the signal to the new location. Again, nothing on the ground. The signal jumped again, 300 yards north this time. "Something's wrong with our equipment," Jake said, but I could hear the fear in his voice. "Equipment's fine," Marcus said. "I'm reading the same thing. That beacon is moving." I was about to suggest we return to base when Marcus spoke up again. "Boss, I've got heat signatures, 5 of them, arranged in a circle." I descended to 100 feet. The figures appeared on thermal imaging, bright orange against the blue-black cold. 5 people standing in a perfect circle, facing inward toward each other. "This is Alaska Search and Rescue," I called over the loudspeaker. "Are you the missing party?" No response. The figures didn't move. Not even a head turn. I dropped to 50 feet. Marcus aimed the searchlight directly at them. That's when I saw their faces. "Jesus Christ," Jake whispered. They were wearing winter gear. Parkas, snow pants, boots. But their faces were wrong. Where faces should be, there was just static, like television static. Gray and white patterns swirling where eyes and mouths and noses should exist. And they weren't moving at all. Not even the slight movement of breathing. "I'm setting down," I said. "Cassie, maybe we should—" "They need help. That's our job." I landed 40 yards from the figures. Marcus grabbed the medical kit and jumped out. Jake and I watched from the cockpit as he approached the first person. He reached out, touched their shoulder. Then Marcus stumbled backward and fell in the snow. He scrambled back toward the helicopter, practically crawling, screaming into his radio. "They're not real! They're not real!" He got back in the bird, breathing hard, eyes wild. "They're hollow, like shells. There's nothing inside the clothes. And their faces, Jesus. Their faces are static." I touched one, and my hand went right through where its chest should be. "Calm down," I said, but my own heart was pounding. "I'll check myself." Jake came with me. We walked slowly toward the figures. They still hadn't moved. Up close, I could see what Marcus meant. They were 3-dimensional, but not solid, like holograms except they cast shadows. They showed up on thermal imaging as heat sources, but they weren't real. I stepped into the circle they were forming. The temperature dropped so fast my breath froze solid and fell as ice crystals. 50 degrees in 1 second. My exposed skin burned with cold. Then all 5 figure bodies turned to face me. Their heads rotated smoothly, impossibly, 180 degrees without their bodies moving. The static on their faces swirled faster. I could hear it now, a soft hissing sound like an old television. I backpedaled, tripped over my own feet, and fell backward through where one of the figures was standing. I fell through the snow, but I didn't hit ground. I was falling through black space, complete darkness, zero gravity, no sound, no sensation. I tried to scream but couldn't hear my own voice. Couldn't see my hands in front of my face. Couldn't feel anything. Then I slammed back into my body on the snow. Jake was pulling me away from the figures. I was gasping for air, my lungs burning. "How long was I—" "3 seconds, Jake said. "You fell and went still for 3 seconds. I thought you were dead." Back in the helicopter, everyone was shaking. I checked my watch. I'd been falling through that darkness for what felt like 5 minutes. Only 3 seconds had passed. "We're leaving," Jake said. "Now. This is beyond our scope." I agreed. I fired up the rotors. The engine responded perfectly. The rotors spun at normal speed, but we didn't lift. We were anchored to the ground somehow. "What the hell?" I increased power. Nothing. The helicopter wouldn't leave the ground. "Boss," Marcus said from the back, "the beacon signal, it's coming from inside our aircraft." He checked the equipment bay. Found a beacon we hadn't loaded. It wasn't USAF issue. Smooth gray metal with no markings, no brand, no serial number. It pulsed with light, but there was no battery compartment, no power source visible. "Throw it out," I said. Marcus opened the side door and threw the beacon into the snow. The 5 static figures moved. They walked toward it in perfect unison, picked it up, and returned to their circle formation. The helicopter was suddenly free. I pulled it up hard, ascending as fast as the bird could climb. At 500 feet, I looked down. The figures were gone. The beacon signal was gone, just empty snow. On the flight back, my left hand went numb. I looked down and my stomach turned to ice. My hand was flickering, becoming transparent, then solid, then transparent again, every few seconds. "Cassie!" Jake was staring at me, horrified. "Boss, your face," Marcus said from behind me. I pulled out my phone, used the camera to look at myself. My left eye was static, gray swirling pattern, just like the figures. We made an emergency landing at Fairbanks. I was rushed to the hospital. The doctors couldn't explain it. My vitals were normal, but parts of my body were becoming intangible. My left arm, my left leg, half my face, phasing in and out of reality. The military arrived 6 hours later. They quarantined me, told me they knew about the Brooks Range anomaly, that I'd made contact with something they called a dimensional bleed, that I was contaminated. "We need to study you," a colonel said. He wouldn't tell me anything else. When I demanded answers, they sedated me. I woke up in a research facility, not a hospital, some kind of military base. My entire left side was now permanently intangible. I could see through it. My left hand passed through solid objects like they weren't there. A scientist named Dr. Hoffman explained it to me. The Brooks Range has what he called a thin spot, a place where dimensions overlap. Under certain conditions during polar night, when multiple people die suddenly in the same location, their consciousness gets trapped between dimensions. They become those static figures, stuck searching for their bodies, unable to move on. The missing tourists had died 3 days ago. An avalanche killed all 5 of them. Their bodies were buried under 20 feet of snow, but their minds were trapped in the overlap dimension. The beacon was them trying to call for rescue from between realities. And I was experiencing the same transition, not dead, but infected with dimensional instabeakers. Liddy. My consciousness was being pulled into the overlap. "How long do I have?" I asked. 2 weeks before you're completely transitioned," Dr. Hoffman said. "And there's no cure. This is a one-way transformation." I asked to see my family. He said no, that I was too dangerous. If I made physical contact with anyone, I could drag them into the overlap too. I was a contagion of dimensional instability. I escaped that night. My intangibility made it easy. I walked through walls, through locked doors. Security couldn't hold something that was only half real. I stole a car and drove toward Anchorage. I needed to see my wife Maria and my daughter Emma one last time, even if I couldn't touch them. The transition accelerated during the drive. I had to stop every hour as waves of phasing hit. Once I completely disappeared for 10 seconds. The car crashed into a ditch. I reappeared in the back seat, disoriented, with no memory of those 10 seconds. I made it to Anchorage, parked outside my house, watched through the window as Maria made dinner. Emma did homework at the kitchen table. Normal domestic life. I was crying, but my tears froze and disappeared before hitting the ground. Maria saw me through the window. She came outside, already crying. "Cassie, what happened to you?" "The military said there was an accident." I backed away. "Don't come close. I'm contaminated. If you touch me..." Emma ran outside, saw me, ran toward me. "No!" I screamed. But Emma was 10 years old and didn't understand danger. She grabbed my solid right hand. Immediately, Emma started flickering. The contamination spread through contact. Maria grabbed Emma, trying to pull her back, and got contaminated too. Now all 3 of us were phasing in and out of reality. I'd infected my family, the thing I was trying to prevent. Emma was crying, scared, watching her left arm become transparent. Maria was angry and terrified. "What did you do to us?" Military vehicles arrived. They'd tracked me. Dr. Hoffman got out, saw Emma contaminated, and said grimly, "You've doomed them. The overlap is stronger, with multiple hosts in proximity. You'll all transition within hours now, not weeks." We were taken back to the facility. Jake and Marcus were already there, also contaminated. They'd phased during the flight back. Everyone who'd been in the helicopter was infected. 6 people total. Dr. Hoffman said we were forming a cluster, dimensionally linked. We'd transition together. I started seeing things. Shapes moving in corners. Figures made of static. I was perceiving the overlap dimension while still in this one. The beings there were aware of me too. They communicated not with words, but with feeling. They were curious, lonely. They wanted connection. I understood they weren't hostile, just trapped, lost. They'd been in the overlap so long they'd forgotten what being real meant. Emma transitioned fastest. Children's consciousness is more flexible. She was 60% intangible when she said, "Mom, it's beautiful here. There's colors we don't have names for. And music. Do you hear the music?" I only heard static. But Emma was hearing something from the overlap. Maria was angry, blamed me. "You should have stayed away. You killed us." She was right. I had no defense. I felt myself slipping, memories becoming hazy. I couldn't remember Emma's birthday, couldn't remember the color of Maria's eyes. Pieces of my identity were dissolving. Dr. Hoffman said the overlap was erasing me, deleting information about existing here. I tried writing everything down. My name, my life, my family. But the words disappeared from the page as soon as I wrote them. When we were 80% transitioned, Emma took my hand. She was fully intangible now, but I could feel her hand solid in the overlap. "It's okay, Mom. We can stay together. Look." She pointed, and I finally saw it. The overlap dimension was beautiful, impossible geometries, colors beyond the normal spectrum. The static beings were welcoming us, showing us how to exist there. Maria and I reconciled. "If we're going to be stuck between dimensions forever, at least we're together," she said. We held Emma between us. Jake and Marcus joined our group, all 6 linked. Dr. Hoffman watched as we faded from his dimension completely. We exist in the overlap now, not dead, not alive, something else. We can see both dimensions, but belong to neither. We're solid to each other, can touch and speak. But to both realities, we're just static shadows. The overlap is vast. Millions of beings here. People who died near thin spots all over the world, all trapped between dimensions. The Brooks Range cluster is just one of thousands. This is a refugee crisis. The overlap is filling with displaced consciousness. We learned the overlap is collapsing. Too many beings, too much dimensional mass. The space between is finite. When it fills completely, both dimensions will merge. Reality will break down catastrophically. The static beings know this. They're trying to find ways to help trapped consciousness move on. My cluster became guides, helping newly transitioned beings understand their situation, teaching them to navigate the overlap. I'm still using my rescue training, still saving people, just in a different way. We discovered a path back, not to life, but to true death, moving beyond both dimensions. The static beings who've been here longest can show you how. It's a choice. Stay in the overlap forever or dissolve into whatever comes after. Maria and Emma wanted to dissolve. They were tired. The overlap is exhausting. Constant flickering between realities. Never solid, never whole. They asked me to come with them. I couldn't. I needed to stay, help others. Emma cried but understood. Maria was angry but accepted it. I watched them dissolve. They became static, then light, then nothing. Gone beyond. I was alone, in the overlap with strangers. Jake and Marcus dissolved weeks later. I'm the last of my cluster. I stay out of duty. Someone has to help new arrivals. Years have passed in overlap time. Maybe minutes in real time. Temporal physics are broken here. I've guided thousands of transitioned beings. I'm a legend in the overlap. The rescue pilot who stayed. Beings seek me out for guidance. Dr. Hoffman appeared eventually. He died of natural causes, age, found himself in the overlap. I helped him understand. He was fascinated even in death. This isn't contamination, he said. It's evolution. You're the next stage of consciousness. No, I said. We're mistakes, glitches. We shouldn't exist. The overlap kept filling. I could feel the pressure, like too much water in a balloon. Soon it would burst, merge dimensions, destroy reality. The static beings showed me the only solution. Someone had to manually collapse the overlap from inside, sacrifice themselves to seal the thin spots, prevent the merger. I volunteered. I'd been here longest, understood the overlap physics better than anyone. They showed me how. I had to disperse myself across all thin spots simultaneously, become a barrier, existing in constant pain as I held two realities apart. I thought of Maria and Emma, dissolved and at peace. Knew I couldn't join them. My duty was here, helping others, protecting realities. I accepted the role. Now Cassie Torres is spread across the global overlap network. I'm the barrier, existing in agony as I hold dimensions separate. Every thin spot, every weak point, I'm there. A static figure watching, suffering, preventing the merger. When search and rescue missions encounter static figures in the Brooks Range, in the Himalayas, in the Arctic, in any remote place during darkness, they're seeing me, fragmented across dimensions, holding reality together through force of will. Occasionally someone phases through and sees me clearly for a moment, sees my face through the static, sees the pain, the dedication, the sacrifice. Dr. Hoffman's team documents these encounters. They know I'm still there, still working, still rescuing reality itself from collapse. I exist forever in that state, conscious but dispersed, solid nowhere but existing everywhere. The human sacrifice keeping dimensions separate. Some people can't stop being heroes, even when heroism means eternal suffering, even when saving the world means never dying and never living, just existing in the spaces between. Watching through static eyes as both realities continue because I hold them apart. One rescue pilot against the collapse of everything. I never stop, never rest, never dissolve, because people need saving. And that's what I do. That's what I'll always do. In this dimension, in the overlap, in the spaces between where reality fractures and only my will keeps it from shattering completely.